welcome everybody to another episode of the 𝗃𝗲𝗃𝗲 podcast. It's been a while since I've recorded a podcast. I had a bit of a long run with podcasts where I recorded so many during lockdown, and then suddenly I kind of ran dry. So I had to get back onto the old podcast scene. And this person in particular that's on the podcast today, we've been trying to get together for a long time. I think it's probably been a couple of months now, back and forwards, getting meetings in the diary, and then something happens and it cancels. But I'm so glad I've got her booked in today. So joining me today is another great candidate for the Women in Property series that I've been doing. Now, like I say, I'd always like to take full credit for this series, but I can't because it was a series that my wife has suggested that I do. She said to me, James, you know what? You're always talking to men. You're always talking to blokes. You need to get more women on the podcast because women do fantastic things as well. And I must say, over the last few months, every single lady that I've spoken to who's in property just has an amazing story. And, you know, I think you ladies need to shout about it a lot more because you just you're behind the scenes and you just like to work in silent. You're like the silent assassin. You're in the back there just doing some major projects, major deals, and you don't say nothing about it. And you got the men there just saying, oh, I've got this conversion, that conversion, this conversion, just showing off, and you girls really don't do that. So lo and behold, today I'm joined by Davinder Sanghera from Spot the Day. So welcome, Davinder. I'm so glad to have you on the 𝗃𝗲𝗃𝗲 podcast.
Thanks, James, for having me. It's been a while that we finally managed to connect and get together.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, so Davinder, I'm going to kickstart. Most people ask to tell them a little bit about yourself, but I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to go straight in and ask you, why is it property for you and what is your ultimate end goal?
Why is property for me?
Yeah, why is it property for you and what is your ultimate end goal?
So the thing that I love about property, and it resonates with me so much, and like my skill set is the ability to like work on projects for like a short period of time, and then you've got this amazing kind of property which is generating you an income. So it's obviously the income that comes with it, which can mean freedom, time freedom, or just like life freedom. So I really enjoy that aspect. And then also just like being able to hone into my creativity and create like these funky HMOs with different colors and designs. So those are the two things I would definitely say: time freedom and creativity.
And what is, say, when you hang up your boots eventually, what is the absolute end goal for you?
So I don't even think it's eventually. I think it's soon. Doing property.
Really?
Yeah, on it. Okay.
Wow.
So doing project management of properties, I've realized how stressful it is. Like, especially I do back to brick rip outs, right? So I do these like horrible renovations where we completely renovate a house back to brick, and there's so many moving parts and so many things that you need to stay on top of. Then as soon as the keys are given to the letting agent, it's like, boom, it's just another stress out of my head. Although I've had rats, things breaking down, boilers leaking, but those are just the buy to buy. That happens in your family home anyway, so I can understand that. But I truly think the most passive form of income is to lend money. And that's what I want to do. I want to get to a stage where I'm lending my money and that I'm like earning a passive income from that. And actually, when my angel investors say to me, where do you want to be in 5 years time? I'm like, I want to be you. Like, I'll have my property portfolio that's, you know, bringing in the income. But there's a point where like, I'm kind of like done. It's just been really stressful. There's been builder issues and a lot of horrible things that have happened and a lot of ruined relationships. And maybe it was me as well, like, you know, just letting it get to me. But the most passive form of earning income is just to lend it and get a monthly fixed rate return. So that's what I want to do.
Wow, I love that. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about project management later on and relationships with builders. But before we do that, tell everybody who Dave is. Now, you know what? The first time I heard of you, I just started calling you Dave because I just thought that was your Dave. Your name was Dave. And also, I couldn't believe that you were Punjabi. I thought you were something like Spanish. Like the first time I spoke to Ted, I was like, yeah, that Dave, that you know, that Spanish European looking woman. He goes, what are you talking about, James? She's a Punjabi girl. And I'm like, no way. So come on, tell us about yourself. Where were you before you got into property?
Bueno, yo hablo español, y cuando estoy en España,
Oh,
todo
here
el
we
mundo
go.
piensa que soy española. So you're not the only person to think that I'm Spanish or European. Yeah, no, I think I look really Punjabi. Obviously, I've got a very Punjabi name, Davinder, like Davinder Sanghera. But no, so who is Dave? So Dave is the nickname that was given to me by a friend, which I absolutely hated because it makes me sound like a white man sitting in a pub, which is okay, but I'm an Indian girl. It makes me sound like a middle-aged white man, and I'm definitely not that. But no, so I, yeah, just a Punjabi kind of, from an immigrant family, working class background. I was in banking for 5 years, and then I moved into property. And Dave.
Sorry, Davinder, before you go into banking, tell me about your school bit. Where were you before? What were you like, as you were growing up and getting into a career?
Yeah, so I grew up in Hounslow in West London. Went to a state school, qualified for free school meals, although I didn't ever get them because I was like, begged my dad, I don't want to be part of that crew, like the council estate crew, because I grew up in a nice road and I just didn't want that stigma. So dad would give me my £2 a day. But yeah, like I was really active. I played loads of sports. I was on the debating team. I was gifted and talented. I did extra GCSEs, extra AS levels, like played every sport, ran for my borough, played like everything.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was very, very active, loved being busy. Even now, I just love to have 100 things going on at once. I just love to be busy. So just had loads of fingers in pies, loved to be active. And yeah, then I did my A-levels at the same school. And I've been thinking about this during the Black Lives Matter thing that's been going on. I was actually so lucky that although I went to a really bad state school, I went to a really multicultural school, and my teachers that were white, and most of them were, they really valued education, and they pushed me to do better. And like they just, I love that I had amazing teachers that really drove and pushed people that could succeed. So yeah, credit to that. And then I went to university, so I studied mathematics, as it was like the subject that really appealed to me, the logical side of my brain. I love finding X. When I got to university, finding X became like a thing of the past that you do in your A-levels, and it became about regurgitating proofs, and I nearly failed my degree, but I didn't. I managed to do it in 3 years. I didn't even fail a year, thankfully. So did it got a 2-2, but this was I graduated in 2009, so it was when like the world was collapsing. Bear Stearns had collapsed, it was just the financial crash. So my job offer that I had with Deloitte, so I'd done a summer internship, again, fingers in pies. I was always doing loads of different things, always looking at what I can do in my summers, work 7 days a week in my summers. Did loads of different things, did charity jobs living in Oxford, did army stuff. That was a big part of my university life as well. I did this OTC thing, so I was part of the British Army. I guess you're affiliated with them, although you're technically not one of the officers or soldiers. But although I got paid taxpayers' dollars to do that. So I had 5 streams of income when I was at university, which is mental because there's more than I have now. But yeah, so that was that. University, graduated, and then I had all these aspirations of things I want to do. Getting rejected from Deloitte from the graduate offer was probably the best thing that happened to me, because then I went traveling to 15 countries in 2010, and then I moved to Spain, and I lived with a Spanish family who are a very big part of my life. Even now, my Spanish mum has come and stayed in my family home and been to family weddings, and she's come to India. So is my Spanish cousin and my Spanish mussy, who technically are not my blood relatives, but it feels like we are. And I stay with them all the time in Spain. So that was the connection with Spain. And obviously I learned Spanish whilst I was living with them. And then I moved to New York, and that's when I started my banking career.
Wow. So your banking actually started. So you went over to New York, and you got a job there, or you?
Yeah, I'd applied for a graduate program which sends out UK graduates to the US for a year. And I got a role at Deutsche Bank, and it was meant to be a year and you stay at that company. But my manager ended up leaving 2 months into my graduate year program. So I kind of like kept pestering the organizers to get me another role. I was like, I'm doing nothing. And then I moved to UBS. So I ended up having 2 experiences, one at Deutsche Bank, one at UBS. And the UBS role was just amazing. It was the reason why I then ended up getting the treasury desk role, which is when I was a trader back in London. So that was quite good.
Davinder, tell me something. Is banking as glamorous as people make out to be? You know, you see people talking about being a trader, being a banker. I do this, I do that. I've always seen it as being quite a nice, high-flying career, and people are just out in posh restaurants at lunchtime having a great time, meeting with clients. Is it like that, or is it totally different?
There are aspects that are like that. I'm definitely way too young to know what it was like for the glamour. So I started working, I went into banking, and especially on the trading floor in 2013. And this is when like all the banks were having libel scandals and paying fines. So there was so much you couldn't do. You couldn't do the client dinners now. You know, anything over £25, I think it was, or £50, you had to like tell your team, or you had to tell like the head of the team that this was coming from a client. So regulation had come in, loads of scandals had come in. So I worked with some of these dinosaurs, I call them, that had been at the bank for 27 and 32 years. And they would say, life isn't like what it used to be. We used to have a lot more, a lot more ability to kind of make our own decisions. But so when I then came in, I was just way too young. There was just so much higher, like kind of regulation and things that had to be done. So I didn't really get to see the glamour. There are aspects of it, obviously, like you get paid for drinks and stuff, and like dinners and things, but that's like once a quarter. It's not really the day to day. I actually worked also on the treasury desk, so which means like I was the bank's bank. So every other desk, like so if it was like metals, FX trading, they would come to my desk to get money, because my desk controlled all the bank accounts, so like over 70 bank accounts. And my desk also set LIBOR, which was really like stressful as well. It was like an hour and a half of like stress. And obviously LIBOR was quite a big thing, and there was all those fines. I think the bank that I worked for, I mean, I don't mind saying it, I feel sometimes a little bit naughty, it was HSBC. I think they were the only bank that didn't pay a fine during the LIBOR scandal. So wow. Yeah, there was loads of British banks that did. I mean, they had fines for other things, don't get me wrong. But yeah, just for LIBOR there wasn't, and there were people were just getting fired left, right and center. So when you're kind of in that environment, you're just nervous, you're more scared. Okay. Like everything gets scrutinized. You have to justify everything. Like sometimes I wouldn't make the best decision and I'd have to justify it to my manager, and I'd say, well, at the time this is why I did it, A, B, C, X, Y, Z. And it was like, okay, fine, that was the most rational decision. Or next time, could you think about this? I'm like, yeah, I didn't think about that. So it was just always like, executing, making decisions like then and there, and then hoping for the best that they didn't go wrong.
I mean, the closest I ever got to a trading floor was, I remember when I was in school and I did work experience at British Telecom. Okay. And this is in the mid 90s, probably 97, 96. And we actually went onto a trading floor with a BT engineer because something had gone wrong. And it was those days when I think computers were just kicking in a big way. So there were still bits of paper everywhere. I still remember these days when we were going on this floor and fixing telephone lines, and I'm reeling a line in. And even back then, I remember it being such an amazing, vibrant place of energy. But yeah. I guess you missed out on that bit.
I missed out on that. Even, like the senior traders would be like, yeah, we used to smoke cigarettes in the office. We'd be shouting at each other. There'd be all this ruckus. But yeah, it was just all like, online. And even like the programs that you would be using, they would catch you out if you inputted a trade incorrectly. Whereas, can you imagine like before those systems, so they're just parameters everywhere. You just can't go wrong. So it made it a lot more easier. There was just so much more regulation. You're always being scrutinized for things. So yeah, I was just too young. I didn't see that environment. It was all electronic and kind of like pushing buttons on 6 computer screens. That's what it was like to me.
So tell me, at what point did you think, you know what, I've had enough of banking, I'm out of here, I'm on my bike, I'm going to do what I want to do? Where did the transition come from banking into property?
So I think there's 2 things. The first one is after I graduated, when I did those 15 countries in 2010, one of the things that I did, there were not loads, but there were quite a few graduate go abroad programs, and you had to fit a criteria. So if you were from a lower income family, so had received a full grant for university or some maintenance and stuff, and like your parents' income was, you know, certain lower than a certain amount, and I ticked all the boxes, you know, ethnic minority woman, I'm sure like all of those played about it. I went on this expedition with 𝗲𝗏 International to Costa Rica, Nicaragua. Now 𝗲𝗏, they're quite a big presence. Even Prince William and Kate Middleton did them separately before they went to university. But so it's usually for pre-university people, but they had this program where they were supporting graduates, because I graduated during a time where it was just, you know, awful, and there were no jobs for the graduate market. And so I did these 3 months in Costa Rica and Nicaragua, and it changed my perception on the meaning of like life, like things that I would care about, like straightening my hair, or, you know, what pair of jeans go with this, oh, my jeans don't fit. It didn't really matter when I was living with a family in Nicaragua where they had a toilet in their garden, and the chickens would come into the house, and one of the sons slept on top of the table of the kitchen, you know, and that was so humbling. And I was like, you know, I would think about my house with like the 3 bathrooms and all the taps of water that, you know, you could just get free water. Like they literally had a well, which they'd have to get the water out to shower, and you showered in the garden. And that was I loved it. It was so like just a humbling experience, and it really put into perspective. It's really weird because obviously being from India, and I've gone to Punjab loads of times with the family as a young kid. It's different when you are actually experiencing what other people are living, because even when I went to Punjab, I've never even sat on public transport, even now at 32 years of age. And I'd always go back to the parents' house, which, you know, like has like 8 bathrooms, has 8 ensuite bathrooms.
Wow, you don't know what you've missed if you haven't been on public transport in Punjab.
I know. So even my India life, like although you see poverty, it's still removed. It's so distant from you, right? And so and it was weird. It was like actually experiencing like this poverty. And like, I don't know, I feel like I was always 2 worlds. Like being Indian, I always felt like, you know, in comparison to India, we're kings and queens. But then when I came to the UK, I've always been in the UK, but in the UK, because I qualified for free school meals and I went to a state school, blah, 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 the government and the world was telling me, well, you qualify for all this, you're poor. But I didn't ever feel poor. You know, there was always a disconnect of the 2 worlds that I come from. But so going back to your question, why leaving banking? So I did 𝗲𝗏 in 2010. And I always felt that sense of like, I wanted to do something meaningful with my life. And even if it meant impacting one person, that's just one in a positive way. That's just one person. But then there's also like, I'm the first person in my family to go to university and get a degree. And my mum, who was born and brought up in India, her thing was always like education. And it was like, oh, get a nice job, you can wear nice suits. And sometimes I'm doing a maths degree, all my friends are applying for banking jobs. It just seems you're keeping up with the Joneses, right? It just seems like it's the natural progression. And then like when I was there, it's like, okay, this is like really fun. I've achieved probably like the maximum that I would for somebody of my background and caliber, but is this life, right? Like, am I going to do this for 27 and 30? Do I want to be like the senior trader that's been here for 27 years? Like, I don't aspire to be like him. Actually, if I turned out like that, I would want to slip my wrist. Like, that's an awful person. I don't want to be like, that's not my ideal role model. And so it was just being in that environment. I just realized like, I mean, I had amazing women managers. That was really lovely, like having inspiring women. My managers were only women. I had 2 and they were women, and they were both so young and both inspirational. So you kind of get caught up like you want to be like this, and then you're like, no, I don't want to be you. You're not my role model. Actually, everything that you represent in your life, like I would hate if my life was like yours, even in, you know, 3 years time, in 4 years time. And so kind of like thinking about that was the reason why it was easy for me to leave, just because it was like, I don't want my life to represent this.
So Davinder, tell me about your first property project then. How did you go about it? How did you find it? What was it?
Yeah, so when obviously I was in banking and I realized that I didn't want to do this for the rest of my life, I was also very aware that my remuneration was the highest it was ever going to be if I stayed like in the corporate sector. So I think in life you always go forwards, not backwards, even if that means remuneration. And so I was like, okay, how do I sow the seeds to make sure that when I leave banking, I'm not piss poor, right? So I'm not like, you know, scraping together, because I'd now achieved this quality of life. I was going away 12 times a year. I love traveling, and I never had to think about money the way that my parents had to. Yeah. And it was that freedom that comes with having a decent salary. And so my grandparents, actually, my granddad is a landlord, so he owns property. And I was aware of this, you know, like, oh, property, everyone does it, secondary income. And I knew of people like Indian uncles that were just only landlords, you know, and that were only landlords and that's all they did. And I just thought, okay, well, I've got this decent salary. Let me maximize this as much as I can before I leave banking to do whatever it was I wanted to do, which was saving the world. We'll come back to that in a second. And so I was like, okay, I became obsessed with wanting to buy a property. I was so obsessed. I was like saving up every penny, and just like I had this big goal. And because I had this big goal, it was the motivating factor for me to keep being in banking, because it was like, I now have this amazing goal. I have to buy this property and I have to utilize my salary to get as much mortgage as I can. Okay, and so I worked backwards. I got my decision in principle. I then realized like, okay, what my affordability was. I wanted to get somewhere halfway between central London and my parents' house, because I thought, oh, I'll always work. It was kind of like, I'd always work in the city, although I was kind of planning to leave. So you kind of want to hedge your bets, and you want to pave the stones so that you can come open the doors to gates that you might have closed, but not permanently. Do you know what I mean? So it was kind of like, okay, let's do this. So I started looking in Putney, Wandsworth, Earlsfield, Wimbledon area. And then it just went to Wandsworth because of the affordability. You get a bit more money, a bit more bang for your buck there. A bit more like, you know, properties for the sizes and the price. And then just found this, I went to like 50 viewings, found this property that had a little bit of potential. And that was my first project. So I bought that in 2016. I completed in February. It was my buy-to-let, so I didn't, you know, play the residence card and then convert it to a buy-to-let later. I was also aware that I didn't want to do things that might shoot myself in the foot, because I was in the banking industry and a lot of traders were losing jobs for doing things. And, you know, like you read about it in the news, in City AM, whatever it was called, like the free paper. A banking official that was on like a 6-figure salary didn't pay his train tickets for 3 years and then got fined and then got like lost his job. And I was like, oh, it's just not worth it, you know, for an extra couple of grand. So I did the buy to let, and thankfully I completed on my house 6 weeks before George Osborne brought in that rule of like the stamp duty. So I actually then paid like just the normal amount of stamp duty, thankfully, because I didn't complete 6 weeks later. So that was my first project. It was a 2-bed flat. On the viewing, the agent had told me that the flat that it sold below had a stud wall between the dead space of the dining area and turned it into a 3rd bedroom. So I knew instantly I was going to do that. I'm one of those people that I just talk to everyone. I talk to people on the tube. I'm one of those annoying people. So I like, when I bought this property, I like went around, knocked on all, like there's 8 flats in the building, knocked on the doors. And I was like, hi, I'm Davinder. I've just bought the flat. Can I just have a look at your at your flat? Like, it's really just, and I'd invite them in to see mine. I'm like, it's really disgusting, you know, but can I get some inspiration? So I got inspiration from just the flats in my block. And yeah, just made friends that way. You know, if I needed a plug lead, I go and knock on auntie and uncle in flat 1.
Oh, well, you had an auntie and uncle, yeah?
There's an auntie and uncle that live in flat 1 as well. That's been there for like over 35 years. So it's worked out really well. Like, you know, they'll recognize me. I haven't been to that flat for like probably 3 years now, but yeah, it's just, you know, ticking along in the background. It's my most passive like property income, and I love it. Yeah, I don't do anything onto it.
Did you add value to that one then? You're saying,
yeah, so I bought it as a 2-bed, and then I turned it into a 3-bed. And then because I added this stud wall between the dining area and the kitchen, I had to get builders in that did work for 3 weeks, created a new entry for the kitchen, completely remodeled the kitchen, and then just ripped out the horrible like cream carpet, put in wooden flooring, and then just liquor paint everywhere to like white rather than the magnolia. So yeah, turned it from a 2-bed into a 3-bed. And then actually it got used as a 4-bed because the living room was separate to the kitchen. So I've always had rent-to-rent companies that have managed it as a 4-bed. And I love it because if I was to rent it as a 3-bed, the 3-bed income I would get is less than what I get as a 4-bed to giving it to a rent-to-rent company, and they manage everything and like do all of that. You know, I don't even do like the gas safety or the electrical certs and stuff. So it's super, super easy. It's so passive.
You make it sound really, really easy. I just want to kind of come back a little bit because this is your first project. You've bought it. You've ripped it apart. You've made it into a 3-bed.
I didn't rip it apart.
Okay, you put a wall, but you still remodeled the kitchen. Now,
yeah.
This is someone who's come straight from banking, got no building experience, no nothing. I'm guessing you didn't know about builders at that time. Were you finding builders?
But I've always been, it's interesting, but I've always been quite savvy with things. So I remember being at the flat on a weekend. So we must have completed on a Tuesday. And I was with my granddad, and my granddad had driven in his car, and we'd got to the flat, and I was meeting a builder. I don't know what I was doing. Maybe I wasn't meeting anybody. But I was meeting a builder, and my granddad was there, and I then went on like, I was like, well, why am I here and just meeting one? Let me meet others. I started going online, I started calling loads, and I got 3 to turn up, or maybe 4 to turn up that day in the space of 3 hours that I was going to be there with my granddad. And 2 of them were Indian ones, and one was this Polish guy. And even my granddad was like, you're hiring the Polish guy. And he was the most expensive. He pulled out his notepad. He had like a measuring tape, and he was the only one that did that. And I just got that sense of like, okay, this guy's gonna like walk me through it. So I didn't go for the cheapest. I went for the one that I was the most comfortable with. And I also had my granddad, who'd met the Indian ones, was speaking fluent Punjabi, and I was too. And I just didn't feel comfortable with what they were saying, you know, and I felt more comfortable with the Polish guy. And I was like, right, I'm giving him my business. He's a little bit more. I didn't negotiate it because I didn't know anything about that. I had done no property courses. I was very arrogant, very like much, I'm a trader, everyone does this, you know, I can do this. Very much on my high horse, big ego, which is definitely like gone, or hopefully it's going since then. So so now it's like obviously like negotiating, and you know, you realize that the first like price that they give you isn't always the true price. But yeah, you know, there were loads of learnings. I made £35,000 worth of mistakes on the first project, but I realized that with hindsight after doing these courses. I'm like, okay, you do pay for your education in one way or another.
Wow. 35 grand on your first one, yeah?
Yeah.
What kind of mistakes did you make?
So I definitely bought it £25,000 more than what I should have.
Okay.
That was definitely it. Like I jumped from 425 to 452. Like
you serious?
Yeah.
Just like that?
Just like that. And that's 25 grand, you know, and the agent was just playing a game. I know that now, but at the time, obviously I was like, I want this house. So I just jumped from 425 to 452. Yeah. And so that was 27 grand actually. And then 10 grand, because although the renovation only took 3 weeks, from me buying the property to getting the first tenant in, it was 5 months. And so and obviously it gets rented at £2,000 a month. So if I think of that as like 2 grand a month, that's 10 grand, when actually it should have just taken a month. You know, I should have lined up the builders before I completed. I should have had them come over to the property the day that I changed the locks, like, you know, met them then and there, or that weekend. And I should have instructed a builder straight away and got them to work. I just didn't do any of that. I just wasn't aware. I was working full time, and I remember being really, really stressed out. You know, me and my cousin helped me paint it. She took a day of work, I took a day of work. Mum and dad came and did Bart. My dad's actually Mormon, so he did his like Christian prayer. Like my family, my daddy, babji, mum and grandparents and mum did Bart as well, so that was quite funny. But I wasn't aggressive with the marketing, you know, and I just thought, oh, it's a flat, it's going to get traction, and it really didn't. And so it stayed online for a while, which is weird because I'm so aggressive right now. Like I have tenants. I know tenant is moving in, say like, you know, the 1st of August, and I'm like to my builders, you have 10 days to finish this house, and they're like, we are doing the extension, we haven't even got the kitchen in. I'm like, I don't care, I've got a tenant moving in first of all, and I make us work all towards a deadline, right? And this does happen, it happens. Whereas like, obviously I was just had a full-time job. I was thinking, oh, the mortgage is only £500, I can afford this from my salary. Of course I could afford it from my salary, but I wasn't that entrepreneur. I wasn't thinking like of all of those things that you think about when you are in property full-time.
Mm-hmm. So tell me, when did the HMO start coming in? Because there's no doubt you're known for HMOs.
Yeah. So that was my buy-to-let, so obviously not a HMO. So when I left banking ended up being February 2017, and I actually wasn't going into property. I left banking to go save the world. So I wanted to work in international development. I had a job interview in Tanzania for an American NGO that was working with farmers that introduced Western plant seeding techniques to farmers that then they are able to grow more crop in the same acre of land that they have. It was an amazing business model, and just I flew out there, and so really like loved the team and stuff. But I was trying to run away from banking, and like anything seemed better than nothing. And I thought that this Tanzania role was the thing that I was supposed to do, and it wasn't. I mean, I didn't even end up getting it. There was someone else on the interview that was a lot more versed in that kind of like field, and he'd also been living in Tanzania for over a year, whereas I was kind of like the one that they take a gamble on. So I didn't get the role, and that again was a blessing in disguise. But I was like, I really want to add value. I want like to people's lives. I want to like life and community and society. And so the crisis that the world was dealing with at the moment, which like they still are, which obviously doesn't really come about in the news at the moment, was a refugee situation. So I had like this kind of like weird affiliation to the refugee situation, and so I started exploring opportunities and pairing up with organizations that go to Greece. So I left banking like 28th of February, and 3 weeks later I was in Greece, with this small grassroots organization called the Worldwide Tribe, and just was there. And I was supposed to be there for about 3 months, maybe 6, if I really enjoyed it. I broke my wrist on day 2. So one of the refugees, broke my wrist, and I was playing football. I was in goal, and there was me thinking I'm the hero that I could save this ball, and just clean cut, like just fracture. Never broken a bone in my body, considering I like jumped out of planes and done weird army stuff. But yeah, broke my bone, broke my wrist doing that. Came back home after 5 days. But whilst I was there, I was reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, the book. I'd never read the book before. Mm-hmm. So it's March 2017. And because I'm reading this book, the algorithms on social media are popping up to me. So I then went on a freebie 2-day, like a 2-hour thing, and then went to a 3-day. And that was how I stumbled into property. And so actually, like when I left banking, it wasn't to do property. I left banking to do like meaningful stuff. I already had my one property ticking in the background that was giving me my income. I had managed to negotiate a redundancy package. I don't know how, because I was the youngest trader on my desk, and the team were hiring, so they don't do that. But I managed to work my magic. So I had a pot. And I was very aware that this pot was going to like diminish pretty soon, right? Like unless I did something creative with it, and start buying some more properties. But now like my pot was really small. I didn't have the salary and the mortgage and the affordability, but I had this one investment property. And by the time I left banking, I'd had it for about a year now. When I started doing the property courses, and then I was just like, yeah, I can do this. I can raise money from investors, not from my family, but I'm sure there's people, I just knew, I just believed in my heart I could do it, and I could be successful at it. And I was like, yeah, I can do this. I can do this. And so I went on these property courses, met a property mentor, and they teach you these buy-to-lets plus 200 plus 250 pound. That's amazing, right? Like any time that you're increasing your income. But I was like, I need to get my salary back as quickly as possible, and I'm not going to do that with 200 pounds. On top of that, my net income, my net cash flow on my Wandsworth flat is 1,500, 1,600. I need something to equivalent of that. Okay, yeah, I bought nearly a £500,000 flat, and I pumped a lot of like capital into it. But I was like, okay, I need something the equivalent. So HMOs just seemed like the natural step. And I was like, I'm not doing these buy-to-lets. I'm not doing a £200 strategy. It just wasn't for me, just from what I had done. If I was 10 years younger, you know, and if I was like maybe even 7 years younger, 100%, you know, like you make all your mistakes, all your learnings from the first one. But I wasn't. I was a little bit older, and I was so adamant that I wanted to do the next thing. Let me just do property, make my income. So that's where you've caught me. You've caught me at this property thing. So when you asked me where at the beginning, where do you see yourself? Where's the end goal? The end goal was never property. This is just the time pass stopgap goal, right? And then I'm going to do the thing that I'm going to be amazing at, and that's going to be the thing that people recognize Davinder for, not the banking, the trader stuff, and the property stuff. That's just a small part of what I've done. It's just the thing that I'm doing for now, for the time being. So yeah, that was it, I guess.
Do you know what I love everything here that you said? So you started in banking, which meant you were dealing with money, right? You then go on a property course, and the first thing you think is, I can raise money from investors.
Yeah.
And now your end goal is, I want to lend money.
I want to lend money. Yeah.
So it's just been money, 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 like full circle.
Yeah, it's just full circle. Yeah, I'm like, I want to lend my money. I want a little Davinder coming along, showing me the business plan and wowing me away. And yeah, and that's what I want to do.
There you go. That's my cash.
I don't know whether I should say this. I don't know. So although I've done a, you know, it's all on my social media. Like when I did PP in Knightsbridge, it was like nearly raised £1 million from investor finance. I've never given charges to any of my investors.
Wow.
Ever.
Do you think that's because you're quite a likable person?
So
do you think people invest in people?
Yes. So James, like, I've had more no's than I've had yeses. I'm so vocal about this, right? But every no, every failure is a chance to reinvent yourself. I love failures. I've had my biggest successes from failures. When I got rejected from Deloitte, I went and traveled the world. I now speak Spanish because I got rejected from Deloitte. You know, when I failed at banking, so what I failed to tell you, although I was mentally checking out of banking, it became so apparent that I was mentally checking out of banking. My manager put me on a performance improvement plan, a PIP, because she was like, what are you doing? She was like, what are you doing? She took me into a meeting. What are you doing? And I was like, in my head, I was like, she was like, since the summer. And I'm like, yeah, I completed on my flat in February. I got tenants in July. I mentally checked out in July as soon as I got a second stream of income. And so I failed at banking, right? And because I failed, I reinvented myself and did property. And I love that. Like, I love failures. Every no has been a yes. It's so funny. I had 2 investors that wanted to lend to me. They came and met me in my investment area, took them around my properties. One was 50,000, one was 10,000. They both didn't end up investing with me, right? It was the irony. And I was like, what did I do? What did I say? I took them around my projects. Then the next investor, I got introduced to a network because I was saying, I like need some funds. So got introduced to by an introducer who I also paid them 1% of the loan size. Spoke on the phone. We met for coffee. There were a couple. They were a couple that had also property investors and had sold an investment, had a bit of capital, wanted to obviously utilize it further. They had been burnt 10 years prior, and the only reason they were able to get their money out was because they had a second charge on this property. I managed to convince them to lend me £130,000 with no charge, and they didn't even step foot into my properties. And
wow,
I changed the narrative. Instead of talking about my projects and the numbers of my properties, I was talking about me. I was like, I live at home with my grandparents. Yeah, I'm inspired by my grandparents. You know, they like live this amazing life. Like, they're both retired from British Airways, and all they do is go on holidays. And my granddad's got 2 investment properties. That's what I want to be like. That's my role model. And they were like, and I never spoke about that before. You know, I didn't talk about I come from a working class background, and like, you know, I qualify for free school meals, and I just didn't talk about those challenges and those things. I was focusing on with the 2 investors about the property, like, look how amazing I am, look what I'm doing. And I didn't share my story. And then as soon as I started sharing my story, it resonates with people. And I guess like the rags to riches story, right, which everyone loves to hear. So I stopped talking about property and my projects and just started talking about me. And then I started asking them questions about them. And I was like, oh, tell me about your daughters. Oh, what university are they going to? So I just changed my conversation, and I made real connections with the real people, you know, rather than like superficial ones.
Yeah, no, I think that's great because at the end of the day, you're right. I found it, people invest in the person. You know, you could have a blinding deal where they're going to make 200 grand profit, say, you know, or whatever. But if they don't like you, if they don't like what you're saying, if they're not feeling that positive energy coming from you or that aura from you, you can kiss that investment goodbye. You know, I like yourself, I've had family members that have invested in projects and they've always been like, I've been like, do you need some kind of contract? Let's sign a contract. Let's get you a charge. And they're like, no, we're investing in you as a person. And like you say, they'll like to hear about the project, but they don't need to come and see it. Don't need to see what stage it's at. And it's very much like you as a person.
Yeah.
That they invest in. I want to ask you something. So when you're raising money, I'm guessing now you find it pretty simple, right?
Yeah, investors find me more than I go chasing for them now.
Okay. And that has always, like, because you said it quite early on, you said when you went on a property course, that was the number one thing that stuck out for you was, I can raise money.
Yeah, I had to, because I was like starting at a place of zero, right? Although I had this little pot because obviously I had a redundancy payout, I then used that little pot to invest in courses in property education. So I started at zero. I'm like, I have nothing now. I have no capital. I started from a place of zero, and I started from a place of capital zero, but I had this £500,000 property, right? Which had equity in it. And so that was the thing that like was going for me, and I'd done it once. And so I just knew I could. I just had this like feeling. I was like, I'm just going to be so like, I'm going to be so good at this. I know it because I'm going to, you know, we said this before we started recording. I have this absolute feeling and belief that I can be whatever I want to do. So if I want to be the Prime Minister of the UK, I'm going to be it. If I want to be a doctor, I'm going to be a doctor. And I believe that about every single person that I talk to, whether, you know, it's a little kid or it's someone, and you hear their limiting beliefs and you're like, but what's stopping you? And then it's like, no, you can be so many, like if people just change their mindset, they can be whatever they want to be. And that's it. So I just have this belief and this confidence and this aggressiveness to pursue and chase after my goals. And I feel like if everyone had that, like it'd be amazing, because we'd all be doing our passion. We'd all be doing the thing that we're passionate about rather than the thing that we've got stuck in doing. And so I just had this belief that I was going to be good at it. It was the only thing I was doing. I was like, well, I freaking have to, because I'm doing nothing. I've got a broken wrist. I'm sitting at home, you know, mum's washing my hair over the bath, you know, and then I jump in the shower myself. And I'm looking after my niece and nephew. I'm like, I've got to do something with my time and life.
No, do you know what? I really love that outlook on life, because like yourself, man, I've had quite a few failures myself. And a few years, most recently, I lost my business where I went completely, you know, I was there, rock bottom, gone from living quite a high lifestyle, watching all my cars being repossessed, no money, and just gone from a real nice lifestyle to boom, straight down. And my story, I always call it from liquidation to liquid, because it took me a long time to rebuild myself up again. But like what you say there, and I really resonate with it, is you can do whatever you want to do. You know, you can achieve whatever you want to achieve as long as you put your mind to it. And this is what I tell people that are coming up new in property. I'm always willing to talk to someone, because I think when I started, there were so many people willing to help, so many people willing to go out their way. And I know there's particular people that don't want to give up their time, but I'm always for it. I'm always for talking to people, because all it takes is for someone like yourself or me or someone who's been in property for a while now to inspire them, to give them that kind of kick up their ass just to go out there and do it. And I'm really taken back by what you say, like, you know, you could be anything you want to be, because I feel totally the same as you on that whole aspect and that whole outlook. You just need to say yes and tell yourself you can do it, and then switch your mindset and off you go.
Dedication, motivation, and that drive. That's it. I have a theory. So maybe you agree with me or you won't. So one of my theories, and it's something that I keep in the back of my head all the time, is what you said about having conversations with people. So I have this theory that I can help, that like you can get value from any single person, right? Even if it's a little baby, they can teach you something. Every single person on this earth can teach you something that you don't know, or inspire you, or tell you something which then goes off on a tangent, and then it, you know, you open up into like a plethora of ideas or whatever. So whenever I meet someone new, I'm like, what is that thing that they can teach me that I can then reinvent or change in my life? Right. So every single time I meet someone, I'm like, they have something, even if it's like someone saying to me, oh, like, you know, my back hurts, you should do yoga. And then I started doing yoga and my back was amazing. Right. Like, even if it's like a basic thing, or it's a little baby, which can teach you like humbleness and just like, like, you know, like just like absolute love or something. So every single human being on this planet can teach you something, or indirectly or directly. And if I have that thing about other people, I have it about me. Every single person I interact with, I can impact their lives in a positive way by just maybe a little snippet, or saying, oh, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, maybe you should read it, or I listened to this podcast, or I'm reading this book, you know, or whatever it is, or there's this program, whatever it is. And then it spirals an idea. But sometimes we just don't know what that thing is about each other. And it could be directly or indirectly, because I could connect somebody to somebody, whether they need a solicitor or broker, and they end up using this broker for the next 5-10 years and end up having an amazing relationship because I've connected to them. So I'm always willing to have a conversation with people. But then again, like when you're in this industry, you do get, and you and Ted talk about this a lot, assholes, and you do get a lot of energy drainers, and sometimes people's energies just don't resonate with you, and you have to put a stop to it. So I block people all the time, because for my headspace and my mental like headspace, it is not right for me to engage or see the stuff that they're putting out, or the rubbish. Or, you know, I used to follow a lot of travel people on Instagram and fitness things, and then it started winding me up, because I was like, why am I not doing it? And so I just unfollowed all of them, and my headspace is in such a better place. You know, they've got millions of followers, they don't need me as one. So, you know, I truly do like think that, like, you know, my headspace, everyone's headspace, mental space is way more important. And sometimes you have to keep someone's energy away from you, even though they could educate you on something, you know. And I have family members that are like that, and I really need to keep them as far away from me as possible. It's horrible. And it's just, my energy is just, you know, it's sacred, and I don't want to just give it to everyone. But I'm always open to those conversations, because like you said, when I started off, people gave me that time and gave me the energy. But I was so driven. I was never an asshole. I was always like, right, let me go find out, boom, 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 let me do this. And some people aren't. And, you know, it's just is. And not everyone is as confident, as aggressive as us, or had the failures to know that they can pick themselves up.
Yeah, I mean, if I remember correctly, I had to go through a bit of an application process myself to get you on the podcast, didn't I? You had to, you know, it wasn't just a firm yes. I remember, whoa, I went for a bit of an interview with Dave here. She wants to know who I am. What's my podcast? Let me have a listen to a few episodes before I make a decision. Is this guy's energy right?
It's so funny. I'm so sorry. Actually, no, I'm not sorry. We should do this. I
agree with you.
We should educate people that we should do this. Look, like, you know, it's about brand. Like, okay, so I know I shouldn't share that story because it's not my story to tell. But look, you've got a brand, I've got a brand, and say you do something, or I do something that goes against all of your values, all of your morals, in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years time, and say you're like, actually, I'm deleting that podcast with Davinder because it just didn't resonate, or, you know, she's doing something in her life that I don't agree with. Fair enough, right? That's something that you will do. And so I was just like, I don't know much about jamessahota. I know, obviously, like, I heard about you through Ted. Let me listen to his podcast and see what he's about. And actually, like, listen to your podcast, like you just shared right now about your, you know, liquidation and your cars being repossessed. I know of that because I've heard you say it in your stories. And I'm like, wow, James is such an amazing story. And like, although we've never, like, not connected properly, and had that one-to-one, like, you know, like, we've kind of talked about it, and we connect with each other. We see what each other are doing on social media, and you kind of like have that, you know, like you connect with that person. And so that's what it's been with you. And it was like, I don't know anything about him. And someone that was like, it sounds really extreme, but like misogynistic or racist, I wouldn't be on their podcast. You know, I'm sorry. Like, I don't want to dampen my values for someone else. And I'm not saying you're any of those things, but it was like, let me see your values, let me see what you're about, and listen to some of the podcasts.
I passed the test, hey!
And I got to hear your story, and I love that. And I was once in the car, and I was listening to you and Ted just on a half an hour one about arseholes, and I was laughing in hysterics the whole time, you know, and I never tuned into your Zooms on a Thursday at 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. when they were, and I was kind of like, oh man, I wish I did, like, this is so witty. But yeah, like, you guys were just so funny, and the energy, and I was like, I like James's energy, that's cool, yeah, I want to be on
Oh,
it.
thank you, I appreciate that. Generally when people ask Tej what's James like, he just says, he's some old uncle that I know. That's what he refers to me as, and I'm
He's
like,
like, Uncle James.
yeah, Uncle James. Like, what? Yeah, wait till you get married, mate, then you'll know what it's like being an uncle.
He was like to me, Uncle
But,
James didn't know you were Punjabi, and I'm like, what? But then he like,
yeah,
Davinder.
because I didn't know, because all I saw was Dave, and I thought, she must be Spanish or something.
Yeah, it's funny.
Davinder, let me ask you a question. So being a woman in property, I've asked quite a few women this. Did you find you had any gender discrimination when you first started? Were builders looking at you kind of like, oh, here's a woman, I can charge her this? Or say, for example, when your granddad was there with you on the site, did you ever find that a builder was talking to the man over the woman?
No, never. I've never ever felt that. I've never felt my gender has limited me from doing anything. Yeah, like I've done male dominated things throughout my whole life. I studied maths, which was a male subject. I did OTC, so the army thing, there were only 10% of women there. And I became like a section leader in my third year of being in property, being in banking. So I've never ever felt I had a hindrance from being a woman. I guess like my aggressive attitude, or like, how do I say this nicely? Like my thing of wanting to put people in their place, which I'm learning to rein in. So like, obviously when you're green and you just soak everything in. And so I let my first builder really, like, who was great. I'm talking about first builder when I started doing the HMO project. So out of the 11 that I've done so far, take the reins, and I really leaned on him quite a lot, but I loved his energy, and really, like, you know, really enjoyed what he was saying. Actually, he went and viewed my property for me before I'd even instructed him, and I actually got my second offer accepted because I told him to go view it for me. So yeah, he was all about establishing relationships, and I just didn't get that sense of feeling from him. And therefore, when I worked with other builders, I've never got that feeling from, you know, that they're trying to, because I'm a woman, are they trying to, you know, get one over me because I'm inexperienced? Yes. You know, because I don't know anything about how a house works. 100%, yeah, but not because I'm a woman. And I question everything. And if I don't understand something, I will make someone explain it to me in a way. I'm like, if you can't explain this to a 5-year-old, you don't know it yourself. You know, that quote by Einstein. I'm like, you don't know it. I don't care. You don't know this. You need to explain this to me. And I don't need to know how to do the plumbing. I don't need to know how to do the electrics, but I know what a done up house should look like, and I know what things should do. So yeah, I just always just make sure that I understand to a certain level, especially having, you know, been fobbed off by builders and been treated like a mug. You then start to like ask those questions and, you know, be skeptical and not so trusting of people. And so that's definitely happened.
So before I wrap this up, there's a couple of questions I want to ask you. PPN Knightsbridge, that went down a massive treat for you, didn't it? Because I wasn't, sadly I couldn't come because I had no childcare, but I did see snippets of it and it looked so amazing. How was that for you?
It was really, really good. I was so nervous. It was my first time speaking about my property journey, doing a presentation full stop. I never did a presentation in banking or, you know, at university. And yeah, like I remember my marketing was on the point because we sold out the venue because I just put it everywhere on every social media platform. And I'd like, there's this like theory, this rule that I've come across, like people need to see something 5 times. I think Susanna Cole has mentioned this. People need to see something 5 times before they buy it or they commit to buying it. So I was like 5 times on Instagram, 5 times on LinkedIn, 5 times on Facebook. And so bloody hell, like I think Pippa had to like close down the booking thing because there was like 100 tickets booked and she was like, I just have to lock it off. No one can book now. And so she like had to lock it off. And it was really good. Like I was really in my element and just enjoyed like sharing my story. I could tell from the faces in the like audience that people were resonating with me. But I have to say it's a stark contrast to when I then spoke at Baker Street Property Meet in February of this year, and I was so nervous, forgot all my jokes, was not comfortable, was cold, and that went really horrible, and it was only 12 minutes. And I followed Tej, who was like, had all this energy, and I have energy, but I was just like, I was like operating energy level 2 whilst he was like at 80, you know.
Do you think it's because it's a different crowd? I find at the PPN Knightsbridge event, the one that Tej hosts, it's quite a nice mix, younger, quirky type of crowd, whereas over the other side, it's normally a kind of a serious, older type, kind of more experienced investor type person.
Yeah, no, I want to say it was that. It definitely wasn't. It was me. Like, I was just like super, super nervous. I was cold. I really needed to use the loo. I got called on stage and I wasn't even mic'd up. And they were like, everyone was clapping and I wasn't even there. I looked back at my presentation. A lot of the formatting had gone and I freaked out and I was like, oh my God, my presentation's messed up. And it wasn't. And I just forgot all my jokes, you know, like my little snippets. And
one-liners.
Yeah. So that went really awful.
So Davinder, lastly, if there's any, if there's any young ladies out there listening who want to get into property and they're in a similar situation to what you were, where their pot is zero, they need to start raising money, they need to start speaking to investors, what's a couple of tips you could give them?
Yeah, like it's not even if your pot is zero, if you have a lack of like knowledge or something, anytime there's a hurdle, right? We just have to find the tools to jump over the hurdle. There's always going to be hurdles. And if you can just do that when it comes to like educating yourself about property or raising investor funds, or just getting acquainted with certain things, it's going to become easier when all these hurdles pop up when you're doing property projects. Like, as you know, there's always hurdles. Sometimes you always have to amend plans, and you can, you know, I put a post about this on social media. I can like plan everything to the dot, to the T, but if something's going to break down and something's not going to work, it's just not going to work. So there's always hurdles that come up, but it's always about learning how to jump over the hurdles. I always think like I came across this like line that someone has said to me, and I love using it, like there's always a solution to every problem. And so when you have that, like there's a solution to every single problem, and somebody that you're not connected to or that you are connected to can help you. So it's about having those structured conversations, you know, spending that 10-15 minutes. What is it that the other person can educate me or teach me on? And yeah, just kind of like just being really motivated and driven with whatever your goal is, whether it's in property or not in property, or life goals, or reading a book a week or something. I don't know.
No, that's some really sound advice. If you could go back to when you were 18, what's one bit of advice you'd give yourself?
Oh, that's a good one. When I was 18. Oh, I've just done so much though. I guess I hadn't come across the term like the idea of not living a life with regrets, because when you're 18 you're so young and you just think like you're going to do everything, but if I had known that like there were things that I might end up not doing and regretting those, like just always just like fill up each day as much as possible and just do things and be like motivated and driven to achieving anything, and just not let anybody else, you know, like tell you no, because if they tell you no, it's probably their own insecurities that are coming out rather than your own. So yeah, just not to live a life with regrets and just to do everything, because doing stuff, like it just fills up, you know, memories and time and days. So like if I look back on things that I regret, is the things that I haven't done, not the things that I did do.
Wow. So. That's some sound advice. Lastly, what's one vice or guilty pleasure or naughty habit you just can't live without?
I can clock a packet of cookies every day. I love chocolate chip cookies.
Are you serious? A whole pack, yeah?
A whole pack.
Is that in one sitting, or is that like have a cookie, come back, have a cookie?
Maryland cookies.
Oh, like, yeah.
Oh, they're so delicious.
Double chocolate chip.
Yeah, or not even the double chocolate chip, because even the standard, you know, the red packet is delicious. So that's my vice. chocolate chip cookies.
Oh wow! Well, I've had some really odd ones when I've asked that question before. So some have been quite rude. Some have been ones that I haven't been able to share by some of the guys. But yeah, that's a good one. The cookies.
That's so funny. I've heard Craig Sullivan. He was like, right move, Zoopla. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like, where is your life if you are on right move, Zoopla? I regularly don't even use the apps on my phone that they get put into the cloud and I have to reinstall them.
Yeah. So Davinder, where can people find you if they want to connect with you? Where are you most active and what platforms?
Yeah, I'm most active on Instagram, just with the Insta story that I do, and yeah, just like with the posts that I put up. So Instagram's probably the best way to connect with me. Yeah, I mean, there's obviously Facebook and LinkedIn, but there's probably like 500 unread messages in my LinkedIn that I haven't got through. So yeah, Instagram is probably the quickest and easiest way to get hold of me.
What is your VA doing? Are you not reading your messages?
Oh, I see. I don't have a VA for the LinkedIn. I have yeah, that's something I need. I need a VA for some other bits. I've got a VA for like my bookkeeping and accounting stuff. Boring admin.
Yeah. Stuff that you don't want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Davinder, thank you so much for joining me. And I know you're joining us on our HMO live experience. I think you're joining us day 5, right? The last day.
I think I might be, yeah.
Yeah,
when is it roughly scheduled to be, James?
Oh no, you're going away on your thing, aren't you?
Well,
possibly. It's not till December.
Oh,
so
okay.
It'll be,
cool.
So we're getting you in right at the end when everything is finished. But yeah, for the guys on our HMO experience day, Davinder's going to be coming down doing a talk, and she's done many a HMO. So
because you just wrapped up HMO day 2, right?
We did, yeah, just last Saturday, and we're doing HMO day 3 this Saturday, and Craig Sullivan's on that one, so that's a really exciting one. Cool. And we had 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗲 on day 2, and I don't know if you're connected with 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I know who he is. I'm not sure how he operates and what his strategy is. But Craig Sullivan, I'm a massive fan of.
Oh, he's great. If you ever get half an hour with 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃 and he shows you how he does his figures, you will be simply blown away. Really? Like every other person was in the room. This guy is probably the most in-depth figure guy I've ever seen in my life. But yeah. But anyway, we'll probably end up talking for 4 hours here. But yeah, Davinder, once again, thank you so much for joining me on the J2 Hub podcast. I really appreciate it. I'm glad we finally got it in, and I reckon it's going to be an awesome episode for people to listen to.
Thanks for having me, James.
No worries.